right. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us for the next hour and change, where we're going to talk about a pretty important topic is how to administer Microsoft Fabric. I am Matt Gordon. Really happy to be here to walk you through this. And I will turn it over to my co-presenter right now.
Hey, Matt, Gaston here, Gaston Cruz, Microsoft MVP in the data platform space, Microsoft super user, working Slalom, and this is going to be a great show for us today. So keep tuned for these upcoming topics. We are going to be discussing about how to administer Microsoft Fabric. So let's go to the next slide. Uh, say hi to our moderators. They are awesome. Vanessa, Matthias, thanks today for joining us. We would love to hear from everybody on the audience. So this is going to be an open discussion. Feel free to chime in, start asking questions, go to the chat, share those questions with all of us. If Matthias and Vanessa agree on that, they can show our the questions and any upcoming question that you might have. We are happy to answer that, and of course having an open Q&A with the audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not lecture live, it's learn live. So if it's more of a conversation than a talk, I think we'll all learn more, and it'll be a lot of fun too.
Yeah. So this is the LAN live session all around Administer Microsoft Fabric. Check it out because there's a whole content around this learning path that you can scan that QR code, go directly to this model. This is part of the whole Microsoft Fabric waves, so you can check all the content. And in this case, you can check all the learning objectives and follow up with this model. As we mentioned before with Matt, live and interaction. So we will love everybody to say hi. Let's keep connected. Let us know where you are, how you're doing, who is new for Microsoft Fabric, who is new for the becoming Fabric admin, who is running a Power BI admin role right now and is switching right away from Power BI to Microsoft Fabric. Remember that Power BI is part of Microsoft Fabric, is one of the childs in the family of Microsoft Fabric. So go ahead and let us know if you have any kind of questions or topics around this.
Definitely.
50% exam discount. This is a new thing around the Cloud Skills Challenge. Go to that link. It's really important to not only kind of read all the slides and take on all the details, also to have hands-on experience. So in that Cloud Skills Challenge, you're going to find for every single topic data lakes, lakehouse, data warehouse. You can follow on all the models, and there's a lot of hands-on labs that you can check and go and try uh, in your own tenant. And we are going to be covering a little bit on that, how you can spin up a new tenant by yourself. So it's going to be great if you can chime in, go and check that URL and do the Cloud Skills Challenge also to get a 50% off an upcoming exam.
Saving money's always nice.
Yeah. This is something that the community, and this is something that we've been discussing with other MVPs and community leaders. It is great to share knowledge. So, in this upcoming DP600, there's an exam on how to implement analytics solutions coming. This is going to be a cram session happening next February 13 at 8 a.m. Pacific time, where we are going to be discussing, for those that they are pretty new in terms of certifications, and this is going to be maybe the very first certification for some of them. We are going to be discussing a little bit of what is the exam format, how you can approach the questions, how are the questions coming, what are the common scenarios that coming into the exams, what are the simple questions on that time, and with Matt, we've been there before in terms of doing certifications online.
Yeah.
It's a
Oh
kind of
yeah.
a first time practice, so you need to practice a little bit, and check all the things that happens in the back end, and we can share on that kind of exam common mistakes that we did in the past around taking certifications.
Yeah, and if you're sitting out there saying like, "Oh, I'm not a big certification person," one thing that it may be a bit frustrating because Fabric's pretty new, but I'm already seeing job ads that preferred skills like Fabric certified or Fabric experience. And obviously, with a product that's pretty new, it's hard to bring experience to the table. But if you can bring a certification that can give you kind of that extra step above some other folks that maybe aren't doing this. So yeah, if you're interested at all in kind of focusing your work in the fabric space, that 2 hours there on the 13th, I think will be handy, even though tests are not fun.
And then another topic that we would love to share with you is this new Fabric Career Hub, where you can start, getting into that sense of what are the learning path, what is the takes from the exams, what are the communities where you can engage. It's always great to start finding your local communities, because there's a lot of things happening in communities. So it's not only kind of a sessions and sharing knowledge, is all about networking and connections with all data people that comes to those meetups and those communities. So be engaged with your local community. There's a really great way in Fabric Career Hub to check on your local communities. As well, you can check on all the roles coming into Microsoft Fabric, because as you may know, Fabric is have kind of unified solution. So there's a lot of people coming over from different roles: real-time analytics engineers, data engineers, data architects, Power BI developers, all coming to the same place. So you can check all the roles and get some guidance there.
Yeah, lots of good stuff there. And to your point, like a lot of the community groups, with Fabric encompassing so many things, a lot of your traditional like Microsoft data platform groups are starting to have more and more Fabric content as well. So if you look up the Azure Data Community online, you can find your local group there, and it's likely to dovetail pretty well with some of the things you'll see on the hub here.
And then this is an upcoming event. This is going to be huge. The very first Fabric Community Conference coming to Las Vegas. That's going to be March 26 to 28. A lot of workshops happen on 24, 25, and 29. So go ahead and register in this upcoming conference. This is going to be the very first time we are coming with a Fabric Community Conference. A lot of sessions, more than 200 sessions from the product team, from the CAT team, from a lot of MVPs and Microsoft certified trainers also, sharing knowledge, sharing sessions, sharing a little bit of experience that they have in the Microsoft Fabric implementation. So go ahead, you have a code there to kind of having a $100 discount on the registration. So go ahead, don't miss it out. It's going to be pretty much sold out soon. So if you want to join us, just go ahead and register on the Fabric Community Conference.
Yeah, I'll be there, and I think you will as well, right?
Yep, that's gonna be great to chime in and say hi to many community members.
Yes. Well, and it's even though the name is FabCon, there is obviously going to be a tremendous amount of Fabric content. But if your work finds you kind of Fabric adjacent, or you're thinking like, well, I need to learn more about this, but I also want some content on non-Fabric Microsoft data things, there are sessions on that too. They've really put together a pretty awesome lineup. And yeah, you can tell your boss that you're going to Vegas for work, and hopefully they'll believe you.
Next topic is we are running, and for the last session of this wave of learning together Microsoft Fabric, we had amazing sessions lined up. You can go and check in the YouTube channel all those sessions, pre-record sessions. You can see a lot of MVPs, a lot of community members sharing knowledge about how to start with Microsoft Fabric, how to land data into Spark, talking about Delta Lakes, Data Factory, data flows Gen 2. So all this wave of learning together was a really great initiative from Microsoft. Bunch of MVPs and community members land of those sessions and sharing knowledge around labs and how to go step by step on that process and follow up all the learning models for this one. So they keep the best for the last. So we are here with Matt to share administration for Fabric.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what are we going to learn?
Okay, today we're going to be talking about learning objectives for all of us. If you are an admin or you want to become an admin in Microsoft Fabric, we are going to be going and whole description of the role, what are the tasks, what are the tools that you have, what are the frameworks, the governance, what are the things that you can do as a Fabric admin. We are going to be navigating all around the administration center and then how to manage user access for everything, because at Fabric you have all the granular level where you can set up access at the tenant level and the capacity level, the workspace level, or the artifacts level in Fabric. So we are going to be start discussing, what are the options to make it happen.
Let's get started.
So the introduction for us is, and this is kind of a really common questions. I don't know, Matt, if you get that question a lot from community
All the
members.
time, yeah.
Yeah, Matt, is how I can start, because I heard a lot about being, hands-on on Fabric. How I can be hands-on if I need a tenant first. So the step-by-step process is, you need to sign up for a Microsoft 365 dev account. That is the very first step. Then what you need is a Power BI tenant, so you can sign up in that URL to start your Fabric tenant. And then the next step is activate Fabric on your setup and your tenant. So couple of things that I would love to recall here to make it happen. Let's switch back to my demo screen here and share couple of details on my screen. First of all, this is the landing page for Microsoft Fabric. So let's say that you already have, that landing page, and you can start with app.powerbi.com or fabric.microsoft.com. Go into this portal, and you can see in the settings, you have the admin portal where you can open this screen, and right away you can go to users, and this is the way you can enable Fabric. One caveat around this topic is that in this screen, I always share with companies this option, because Fabric is new. So if you want to learn Fabric, you want to start doing POCs on Fabric, you might be want to enable Fabric, but for one security group in your Azure Active Directory, or should I say Entra at this point? So
I think we're supposed to call it that, yeah.
yeah. So this is the way you can go and check, this option and land Fabric and say, hey, this is my security group or Entra ID Fabric group. So if I already create this group in my Entra directory and adding members and removing members, all those members for that security group are the ones that can chime in and say, hey, this is the way I can enable Fabric only for this security group across my tenant. Let's switch back to slides.
All right. Well, now that you've shown us how to do that.
So yeah, the administration on Fabric, involves many different aspects. So when you start thinking around tasks and how to do more things and managing your Fabric platform in your organization, you're gonna need a little bit on these topics to understand what is the architecture of Fabric behind the scenes. So going to the next slide, we are gonna be checking a little bit on that end. So we are going to be start discussing on how Fabric works in terms of the architecture design. I mentioned before, Fabric is all in one. So that is one of the purpose of a software as a service analytics solutions. You're going to see all the workloads coming. So you're going to be seeing that behind the scenes, Microsoft Fabric is kind of one monolithic solution in terms of landing the data only one time one of the main goals for Fabric is trying to not replicate or duplicate, data, or moving data that you don't need to duplicate, or creating silos all over the place. So anytime you're landing the data in Fabric is all in one lake. And from one lake, in top of that, you are creating different options in terms of, the workloads that you want to get from Fabric. So you are going to see a data warehouse option, data engineer workload, data integration workload, data scientist, real time, and BI. Of course, Power BI is going to be part of that one. So mainly, anytime you land into a Microsoft Fabric tenant, you're going to see this as the option to understand that as a data engineer, you have options based on your role and your persona.
All right. Yeah. So not that you shouldn't pay attention to everything we're saying, but I would say this slide is almost the most important one we've talked about so far. These terms are very important to understand and can be a bit confusing as well. So why don't you take us through what all this means?
Exactly. Let's go there. And those are the kind of the main concepts out of Fabric. Starting with the concept of tenants, where the tenant is, kind of a is the way to have a dedicated space for organizations to create, store, and manage all the Fabric items. So there's often a single instance of Fabric, so you have only one single tenant per organization, and it's aligned with your Entra ID directory. So the Fabric tenant maps to the root of one lake, and is the top level of that hierarchy. So that is kind of the tenant concept. The capacity option is all around compute. So the way you need to think about capacity is the way you can have compute power in your tenant. So the capacity is a dedicated set of the resources that they are available at any time to be used. One of the things around capacity is that you can have multiple capacities in the same tenant. Let's say that you have a company and you have multiple regions or multiple countries. You might have capacities by country, one for US, one for German, one for Canada, one for, and that is one of the ways. The thing here is you have the flexibility and you have your governance strategy behind the scenes. So based on your governance strategy, you can go ahead and say, hey, I need a capacity by country, or maybe you need a capacity by business units. So you are going to be the one that define that. Based on what? Based on your knowledge across the organization. So you're going to be start checking on, okay, what are the projects coming to my backlog? What they are going to be doing with those projects? Are they going to be spinning up multiple data flows, notebooks, lakehouse? How much compute I'm going to need to support those projects? And that's where you start, getting the need around capacity, sizing, pricing model, and so on.
And I would say, based on my experience with clients from a cost control perspective, since we're talking about admin stuff, a lot of times controlling costs kind of falls to us that are trying to keep this running. Um, Capacities often, I won't say oftentimes, but a lot of the times, a department, a team, a person will spin one up for their specific purpose. And maybe that project ends or something gets moved or whatever, but the capacity never gets taken away. It kind of lives on, and they may be kind of hitting it periodically for certain things. So going back to your point about governance, if you're not kind of looking out for what people have created and kind of closely governing their ability to create some of this stuff, you can kind of leak money, which tends to not be smiled on by managers, bosses, executives, all that. So it's important to understand what capacities you have out there and what their purpose is. And if they're no longer serving a purpose, it can be handy and cost effective to clean those up.
Yeah, and you bring a really great topic back there, Matt. That is, one of the things around capacities is that you can start small, scale up anytime, even pause anytime. So remember that you have a couple of options to get capacities for your tenant. One of the options is go into your Power BI admin and say, hey, I need now another Power BI premium capacity, P1, P2, P3. The thing around that is that you don't have exactly that flexibility that you have with the FSKUs around Fabric. Because if you go to the Azure admin and say, hey, I need a really small POC out of Fabric, you can spin up a new capacity in the Azure portal, and then from the Azure portal, you can assign that capacity for any upcoming workspace. So remember that one of the great things around Fabric is that you can get any size of those capacities. You can go to the Azure portal, spin up the new service as Fabric new service, and then go into your Fabric admin and assign that capacity at any time. Uh, Even for scale up, scale down, remember that there's a whole, and we are going to be discussing this on this learning model, that you have APIs. So you can scale up, scale down, pause your capacity via REST API. There's a whole upcoming Fabric admins that are going to be happy to see that the PowerShell is there. So you can scale up, scale down, and pause your capacity. The other concept here is domains. This is a new concept for anyone, So domain is the way to have a logical grouping of workspace. So let's say that you are working with someone from human resources, and they say, hey, I would love one spot to see all my projects around human resources and all the artifacts that I have in Fabric around human resources topics. So it's a way to have that grouping. So even in terms of coming back again with the framework around governance, from a governance perspective, you can say, hey, I would love to have domain admins. So they can go to the domain and they can create their own domains and assign the domain admins to have that grouping of the workspace. For that purpose, I would love to switch again to my machine and go in for a demo on this one, because it's really important to check that in the settings. If I go to the admin portal here, and remember that this is only if you have admin privilege in your tenant, where you can go here in the left of my screen. I'm going to switch to domains. This is, as you can see, new topic. So you can click on domains, and then you can see I have a finance domain. I can create a new one. As I was pitching about human resources, I can go here and say, hey, I want human resources, and then I have a couple of names that I can add as domain admin. And this is kind of the one of the ways that I have to do the logical assignment. Anytime you go to your tenant, and then let's say that I'm going to go to data engineer or any kind of workspace, anytime I create a new workspace, and I'm going to follow the lead from Armando, uh, Killer Me workspace. And anytime you create a new workspace, you can assign the domain. So let's say that you are creating multiple workspace and assign the same domain for multiple workspaces. This is a really great way to have that logical grouping across your artifacts coming for the same project or the same domain, uh, adding those workspace to that domain.
And I
So
think
if
one
you
thing
apply
that's
this,
good to point out is we're not required. So obviously you want to bring you always want to be very organized about this stuff because it's easier to come back and maintain it and administer it when you know where everything is. We don't have to specify a domain for every workspace we make, right?
exactly. That's a really good point. That is only kind of optional, and is just another way to organize your workspaces. Let's switch back to the slide right now, and one of the last items in our tenant and explaining some of the Fabric concept is items. So remember that with Power BI, you have a few items that you can create in a Power BI portal, like semantic models or data set or data marts or reports or dashboards. Now you have a huge option out there that is you can start creating all the artifacts for every single workload out of Fabric. So that means that you can start creating, lake houses, data warehouses, custom databases, semantic models, reporting, bunch of different options in terms of landing the data, preparing the data, mash up the data, and organizing that data into some of the options around warehouses or lakehouse or so on. So that's a little bit of what is, those items that you can create across the Fabric workload.
So why don't we try to understand the role a little better? And I'll say like one thing I'm seeing, as clients start to adopt Fabric and things like that, I don't I think in especially larger organizations, there's maybe not the level of understanding, or they're starting to have the understanding that administering this is a little bit of a different beast than what they've had in the past. So I really like the timing of when we're able to kind of give this session, because do think there are career opportunities out there for folks as businesses start to use Fabric more and more. It's like, okay, yeah, we have Power BI admins and we have DBAs and things like that, but maybe this is kind of a different role, and we need some different folks for it, or we need to upskill the folks we've got. So why don't we talk a little more about what the role is?
I got this question that is, that I've been in the Power BI admin role, and now there's everybody saying that now I am a Fabric admin role. How I gonna be accomplishing and closing that gap between
Yeah.
being a Power BI admin and now I am Fabric admin? One of the main things that I would love to recall here is that you need to understand all the concept that we bring to the table before, because you need to understand that now you're going to have the capacity to say, hey, let's start closing the gap between Power BI developers, Power BI architects, and data engineers, data architects. You need to start understanding, okay, how much power or compute power you're going to need if you need to process this in a notebook, or you're leveraging data flows into, or you're leveraging other frameworks. So it's going to be interesting to have all that in mind to start thinking around how you can accomplish this task as an administration. And there's many tools coming, couple of them. You have you're going to have Purview Compliance Portal. That is an embed experience. With Purview is all around data lineage, compliance, security. So Purview is going to be pretty much embed in your Fabric admin experience, so you can check all the data lineage, all the data coming to your tenant. You can have a scanning metadata API, SDK. You have another tools in terms of, I named that before, that you have PowerShell scripting coming to your admin portal. So, old school, I used to have all the PowerShells to connect and reconnect data sets with gateways in the backend of my Power BI tenant. You can do that right now with any other artifacts across Fabric. So you can start connecting the dots and say, hey, I would love to leverage my own PowerShell CMDLets. So you have all the options to automate many of the processes happening in the backend of Fabric. Let's go further on the description for some of the admin roles. So in the descriptions of the task, you have mainly three or four kind of topics to discuss on this one. First of all, you're going to be talking on the tasks to leverage security and access control out of Fabric. You have a whole options, and this is pretty granular because you can start at the top level, that is the access to the Fabric tenant itself, and you can define, okay, who is going to be your admin for the tenant and all the stuff. Then you have the admins for capacities, because remember that you can have multiple capacities in your tenant. So you can define who is going to be running as a capacity admin. But then you can go more granular level and say, hey, who is coming to my workspace? So you can define, okay, who is going to be the admin for this workspace? Who is going to be the member for this workshop? What is going to be the viewer for this workspace? So you can go granular on that level. And even if I think about items, you can define that policy and that secure access control at the item level, meaning that perhaps I say, hey, in my lake house, Matt can read or write data. Maybe another group can only read data. So that is at the artifact level, and you can get access at the lakehouse level or the notebook level or the data warehouse level. Uh, if we go next on this slice, you can check a little bit on all those topics in terms of who is in top of every single option, so you can check that, the governance layer, where you can start defining, kind of data governance principles. You should know how to secure inbound and outbound connectivity in your tenant, how you're going to be monitoring all the usage of your tenant. That is pretty important because you would love to check all the performance metrics and check, okay, who is running certain notebooks and how much compute I need, if I need to scale up or scale down my capacity at any time.
Yeah.
The other topic is you are going to be able to customize your tenant and coming with configurations across your tenant, like, for example, doing the classification policies, adjusting the look and feel for your reports, for your dashboards, how the platform is going to be needing to configure itself. So couple of things around the customization or configuration out of Fabric, starting with the point that, this is a SaaS service, so you don't need a whole maintenance across the backend. You're gonna be trying to accomplish your tasks, but you don't need to be all the time checking for your infrastructure. And the last thing that I would love to mention here is a little bit of the monitoring and optimization framework. So you have different tools in the backend to manage all the usage of the platform, optimizing the resources and troubleshoot any kind of issues. You can start checking, okay, I need to scale up the capacity, or how to do troubleshooting when I need to refresh data, or if you have connectivity issues. That's kind of little bit of the task that you can do as an admin on your tenant.
Yeah. So one other thing, and we've got a couple questions, which is good. Keep those coming. One other thing I do want to go back to, kind of the first topic on the slide. I think one thing that it's kind of easy to forget is part of kind of the security and access role that's part of this broader role is a lot of times the responsibility falls to us to set up data gateways, because a lot of this stuff is connecting back to on-prem data still, and probably for a long time. Realistically, even though we all spend a lot of time talking about cloud, a lot of data still lives on prem, and even in a service like this, that data's got to get from on prem to cloud somehow, and gateways are the way to do that. And it usually falls to this administrator role to kind of set those up. And as much as we may or may not want to do this, make friends with our network team to make sure it all works.
Let's go to the next slide. I saw Fernando from the audience asking for the paragraph that I just mentioned before in terms of the task. So let's switch to the next one so we can check on those admin tools. And actually, we can go further on that line. It's a
Okay.
little bit, this is the Fabric admin portal where you can manage almost all the aspects on the platform itself. So this is kind of the way you can start defining all the capabilities. I would love to switch again to my screen for the demo, because some of the call outs that I did before, they were part of, the admin task that I would love to share with the audience here. So let's switch back to my slide. And remember a couple of things here. I'm going back to the admin portal, and a couple of things that I would love to recall. First of all, the usage metrics. So you have in the left of my screen, you can start from here to check all the usage metrics that you have in your backend and your tenant. As you can see in my tenant, I'm preparing a little bit, how we access that data, and you have all the, top users for reports, for data sets, and so on. But one of the great things is couple of things that I would love to recall. First of all, this is usage metrics for your tenant, but we were discussing before if you go to your workspace and you create from here, you can see that, for example, one of the governance framework that I shared before is you can check all the data lineage in terms of governance, getting, and usually my way of do this is the opposite. I start from the right and go to the left
Yeah.
because I would love to understand, first of all, how I end up with a machine learning model in this case. And that machine learning model is getting data from these experiments that I have here. And that experiment is loading data because I am running a whole notebook back here. And that notebook is sourcing data from this lakehouse. And that lakehouse is populating tables and files based on two main sources, to Azure Data Lake. So I can go from the right to the left, checking all the data lineage of my data. And I start with an experiment of machine learning, but I can also start with a Power BI report and say, hey, this is my dashboard. This is my report in Power BI. This is my semantic model. This semantic model is running based on data coming from the lakehouse. And that lakehouse is populated by a notebook and a data flow chain too. And the main source is ADLS, SharePoint list, and an Oracle database. So you can check all the lineage of the data back to back to understand what is the process. And this is something that you will have to recall to understand the process, the backend, and how much compute you need to power this solution.
Yeah. And this also helps keep us out of meetings where we have to figure out who wrote what, created when, why, all that. This is going to at least fill in some of those pieces that we don't know, and avoiding meetings is always good. Um, so while we're here, why don't we take kind of a short pause? We've got a couple questions that go back to the domain and workspace stuff, and we talked about how important it is to understand those. So I'm thrilled to see folks asking about it. So the first one we've got is, are there any best practices for segregating prod/dev using domains and workspaces? For example, do I need an HR dev environment and a separate HR prod environment? What are your thoughts there?
That's a really interesting one. From my understanding, and this is and I hate to say it depends, but really it depends
It's the
on your
classic answer.
on the outcomes that you're expecting and how much you need that compute engine. So just to understand a little bit the process, you need to understand, first of all, the requirements in terms of how much you're going to be getting data from the sources. And then what you need to understand is how are the stakeholders are going to get access to your data. Because that means that, maybe your stakeholders are going to be getting data directly from a Power BI app, and there's no need to access the backend data, meaning that they don't have access to the goal layer in the lakehouse, or they don't need access to the data out of the data flows, or they don't need that flexibility that allow you to add more sources to your data flows or your notebook instance. So understanding that, you might want to, first of all, one of the very first options comes to my mind. You can go to the workspace, spin up a new workspace. Always a great definition is spin up a dev workspace. Start working in your mind on naming conventions. That is
Yeah.
really important at this point, because you are going to be ending up with a lot of artifacts. Remember that we start naming them. You can have data flows, data pipeline, notebooks, lake houses, data warehouse. So it's really important to go with a name, a good name convention for all your artifacts, and then start splitting your workspace in dev, UAT, and production. You would love to do that because at the end of the day, data is how your users, business users, are trusting in
Right.
your data. So you want to be someone that say, hey, if I am doing this project, I would love for you to have the exact match of your data. And working on the data quality is really important before you are pushing data to your business user. So best approach at the beginning is starting with a workspace and define all the environments in your work in your tenant.
Yeah, so kind of riffing off that question, I'm curious. So like I've had a couple large clients recently that have been having the same discussion, and it grew out of kind of the data engineering team saying, well, we by standard have these four environments. We have dev, we have test, UAT, whatever, we have stage, and we have prod. And so for Power BI Fabric, we need those same four. And then that kind of gets escalated to the manager who's going to run the cost center or have to account for the money that's getting spent, and they say, why do we need this? And the answer is, well, it's per standard. We have four environments for other kind of data things and other development, so we need four environments for this. Where do you fall there? I'm guessing because you said it depends. I'm thinking you fall maybe a little short of, well, we have to get that to match exactly because we have to. But I'm curious for your thoughts there, because they were. It's weird for me to say an interesting meeting, but they were interesting meetings, seeing kind of their internal debate on what they felt was best here.
Yeah, the main goal here is should be, to get those kind of business outcomes, thinking around how you're going to be approaching the access to your data and what level of access they need from your data, because that allow you to say, hey, one of the things that we are going to be talking about is how you can go and endorse the content of your tenant, saying, for example, if you are certifying a semantic model or you are promoting a lake house, that means that you are saying, hey, I trust in this data. So that being said, sometimes you would love to isolate those fabric
Yeah,
items, saying, hey, I am bringing this item, let's say a semantic model, to this workspace because I am willing to share this semantic model with other business units based on the endorsement and the certification process. So that being said, what you can do is actually start thinking about all the life cycle management for all the artifacts that lives in your tenant,
yeah,
and start thinking around, okay, what's going to be the certification life cycle management for all of us.
yeah. So I think fair to say, because I have had clients, they're like, well, we don't regard this as kind of other like our other software development practices. We're just going to have a single environment. I know where I stand on that. I'm guessing you stand similarly, that that's maybe not a great plan. We at least need dev and prod, right? Because like you said, there's that level of trust as you promote it to prod. It's like we endorse this. We think this is actually for your consumption. It's not just for our playtime.
Yeah, exactly. And it's suddenly there's kind of one of topics that I really love, that is kind of the data ops concept, that is kind of
Yeah,
how we can automate all the process happening in the back end. And uh, with Fabric, I feel that, and you can check this in all the release and the roadmap. You can go to documentation, and there's a really great insights from the Fabric team in terms of what you can expect next in the next quarter, the next month, and when they are going to be hitting production. Because at the end of the day, you would love to start thinking around, okay, how I can automate the whole process of my entire solution. If I have a dev workspace with my solution, and I don't want to become that, kind of a developer or data engineer that needs to move all around for different workspace, all kind of manual stuff and all manual kind of artifacts from one environment to the other. So you need to start thinking around, okay, how I can get a GitHub repo, how I can start landing the data there, how I can have source control, branching, methodologies, and how I can automate the whole process to move and to publish all my artifacts from one workspace to the other. So it's really important to start thinking around how I can automate all those tasks and process.
yeah, and I think it's important that the administrator plays a role in that. You don't, I think, necessarily want just the developers to decide what you're going to have, because it's down to the administrator. That's, as we've been talking about this whole hour, to manage this stuff. So you want it to be sensible, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah,
But having been an administrator of a lot of things over the years, I may be a bit biased there. Um, okay, all right. Shall we go back to the
yeah.
slides?
Let's go to the slides
Okay.
again, and let's keep going from there. We were discussing about admin portal. Couple of things here. Remember that in the admin portal, you're gonna find all these settings where you can start switching on and off. Mainly, some of those switch allow you, as I shared before, that you can start splitting that kind of responsibility in terms of enhancing your Fabric admin portal with that responsibility having only a security group that can access that data. So that is something that you can do, enabling Fabric only for that security group, or even nowadays that everybody is kind of having that buzzword around Copilot everywhere. You can also
What? I've
do
never
that.
heard of it.
Exactly, you can do the same. One of caveat around that is, in the Fabric trial version, you cannot enable Copilot. You need at least a Power BI Premium P1, or what we call the F64 capacity in Fabric. That is the landing zone to go to your Fabric admin and enable Copilot. And you can do that for a security group. So you can enable Copilot with those requirements for some of the security groups.
That's a really good point, because I don't know if your clients are similar to mine, but AI and Copilot is the majority of what they ask about. So yeah, I think it's important to know where you kind of the threshold you've got to meet to turn that stuff on. Before we move on to the next one, do we want to talk about the magic on and off switch?
Pardon me, what was that?
The on and off switch, basically how we can opt up Power BI. You can kind of opt into or out of Fabric. Kind of where
Oh,
the last sentence here leads us. They left us hanging a bit. It's like, but there's one setting that we'd like to call out, but we didn't put it on the slide. So I think we have to tell the people about it.
yeah, of course. From the Fabric admin perspective, you need to go to settings, and that in settings allow you to, going on and off in terms of, uh, enabling Fabric for your tenant, so you can have all the experience for Fabric. So mainly when you jump right away to the Fabric admin portal, if you don't have the options to switch between workloads, that is because Fabric is not enabled in your tenant.
Right.
Let's go over to my machine to explain a little bit on
Yeah.
that detail, because I would love to share that in case
Yeah.
going and
I,
go ahead.
I think this can be a bit confusing, because I'll go to, clients that have Power BI already. Obviously, the Fabric branding is present there, and they'll say like, "We don't have Fabric at all." And you go look, and it's like, "Well, it's enabled, so you do it." So just coming back to kind of administering and managing this, it's important to know that this is there, for your own workplace, or if you're consulting and you're going into other people that may not be watching the session that may not know this switch is here.
Yeah. Uh, I would love to set the stage for a couple of things. First of all, this one is only one of the topics that you can do as a Fabric admin. These allow you to at least, say, hey, I would love to enable Fabric in my tenant. But this is not the only switch. It's kind of a step-by-step process. So let's start from here, where you can enable Fabric for your entire tenant or only for specific security groups. Then what you need to do is go into your capacity settings here in the left of my screen. So in the capacity settings, you need to go over here, and you have a couple of options in this place. You have Power BI Premium, that maybe you already have some capacities in your Power BI tenant. You have Power BI Embed, that is a different service because you can purchase Power BI Embed from the Azure portal as a server itself. You have the option to chime in with a trial version. And in this case, I have already a trial version on my tenant. And of course, you can have the Fabric capacity, where you can, and remember that this is a conversation that you need to have with your Azure admin, because that Fabric capacity, if you want to enable a Fabric capacity and pay for that because you need a production environment and we need to set you did your trial version and then expire that trial version, and you need to follow on the next steps in terms of having capacity for Fabric. You need to go to your Azure portal. You need to spin up a new service, and that new service is going to be appear here as a new Fabric capacity. The last step that your Fabric admin need to be aware of, and I feel that that's the question for many of your clients and my clients, Matt, is
Yeah.
when you create a new workspace from the scratch, say Learn Live,
Great name.
tell me, uh, and then in the advanced option here, I can define who is going to be backing up my workspace, because remember that every single workspace need compute power, and that compute power could be, hey, this workspace is only for Power BI artifacts, data sets, or semantic models, reports, dashboard. So maybe as a creator you need only a pro license here, because you are going to be dumping only Power BI, Power BI items. The other options is premium per user, because maybe you need a premium per user workspace to back up your workspace. And that means that perhaps you need some of the capacities going to premium, but you want to test that before. You can have this premium capacity only if you already have in your Azure tenant assigned capacity, or create a premium capacity for this purpose. And then the Fabric capacity is the same thing. You can assign your Fabric capacity for your workspace. In my case, I'm backing up this with a trial version of Fabric. So you can see that in my case, I have the option to create all the artifacts. And that is one of the main questions that I've been hearing so far from the community. I can see Power BI artifacts in my workspace, but I cannot see notebooks or lake houses or data warehouse. That is because your workspace is not backing up by a trial capacity or a Fabric capacity. And that's why when you switch screens here, and let's say that I'm going to my workspace that I just create from scratch, and I can see that in the icon in the left corner of my screen, if I create my workspace backed up by a Fabric capacity, I should be able not only to click and switch loads between workloads and personas, also I need to see all of this. I need to see that I can create any of the artifacts out of Fabric. So that is allowing you to say, hey, I can create a lakehouse or notebooks or environments or data pipelines from here. So that allows you to see, hey, I am on the right track and I have my Fabric capacity up and running. Let's switch back to
Really
slides.
good points. Yeah. All right. Well, we've referred to it a few times, so let's talk a little bit about PowerShell.
Oh yeah, this is kind of really interesting topic that is all around. How much you can do directly from PowerShell. So this is kind of one of the great ways to automate process in the backend. And would love to hear your experience from here, Matt. In case yeah, uh, what you can do with PowerShell.
Yeah, well, so you have to write code. So that scares me and some other folks. But yeah, I mean, you can do so, some of the things you've shown already, you can do that. You can create managed groups. We talked about gateways earlier. You can somewhat create those that way. You can create data sources as well. And you can also, so there is a monitoring hub. So there's a GUI where we can see kind of administrative monitoring information. But we can also use PowerShell to pull that information. And if you wish to present that a different way or pull it into a different solution, or persist that somewhere else, because I believe this is only persisted for 30 days and then that kind of rolls over. This, I don't know if I would say the best way, but if you're comfortable with PowerShell, this is a very good way to get that kind of information out, and then you can do a lot of other things with it once it's yours.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would love to share here around the PowerShell scripting is, first of all, as Matt mentioned, you need to write code. That there's no easy way to say this, but you need to
No,
write the code on PowerShell. But after you start connecting the dots in terms of understanding what is available in the REST API and how Fabric is exposing access to all the artifacts, you can start understanding, all the concepts that happens behind the scenes. For example, if you need to refresh data, if you need to access your dataset ID or semantic models ID, if you need to access, let's say that you are checking, how you are providing Power BI Pro license in your tenant, you can
Yeah.
access all that data. You can check, even if I say, hey, I gave Matt a Power BI Pro license 6 months ago. Matt is using that Power BI Pro or not. So you can access that data. Let's say that you have 1,000 users or 10,000 users in your tenant, and you can access all that data. So you can start the scoping of, okay, how my users are leveraging the licensing and access to the data right away. So you can start thinking around, how you are leveraging all that, licensing cost, metrics, usage, what is the performance out of your tenant, how much is taking for, example, your notebooks, how much is running back in your notebooks, how much time is taking them to kind of land data. Same with data flow session 2, how much is taking, what is the worst scenario for our data flow session 2 in our tenant. So you can start understanding the process and start making really great decisions as an admin to check, okay, what are the best practices across our tenant based on the usage that we have across artifacts.
Yeah. And you can hit this link here for kind of deeper information and examples for how that works. And if you're sitting there saying, well, I don't want to click a link, I don't want to read anymore, we can always use ChatGPT to get us started, right? Say, write me a PowerShell to do something. And
Actually,
it may not be right, but it'll be,
actually, Matt, one crazy idea that we experiment kind of a few weeks back is you have kind of ChatGPT or Copilot, should I say, in Power Automate, where
yeah,
you can automate that process and ask Power Automate to do the PowerShell scripting for you. Pretty much is interesting. It's not perfect, of course, but it's a
it's a good
really
start.
good starting point. So if you are not in the PowerShell scripting expertise, you can start finding copilots for that, and you can
Yeah,
start, as a great starting point. At least you are not starting from 0%. You can
that's
start
right.
from 25%, and that is a great starting.
Yeah. When all else fails, ask the robot.
Yeah. So this is pretty much a little bit of what we discussed before. You can access all the admin APIs and SDK. So it's a little bit connected with the PowerShell scripting because you would love to check all the models and all the methods that they are available in the backend of Fabric. You can go to the release plans and check on what is coming, how you can access the data, how you can access all the artifacts. So there's a lot of APIs open for developers, and you can access all that data coming in your backend of Microsoft Fabric. So let's go next. And actually, in the next one, something that we recall before is you have an admin monitoring workspace. You can access all this data. So this is the admin monitoring workspace where you can see all the artifacts, all the capacities, and how you're leveraging the usage and the consumption out of your capacity. So this is really interesting in terms of, how you can access all the data as an admin to see how your users are being leveraging your tenant.
Really handy. And yeah, I know like a lot of, especially the larger organizations I'm at, this is a regular question. Like, are people using this stuff? How much are they using it? What, especially if you're rolling out maybe a new set of reports or dashboards or data sets or something like that, the people in charge want to ensure that's being used because it is being paid for. So yeah, this is really handy. I feel like this is kind of an undersold feature that we got. Very cool stuff here.
Yep. And let me go back for quick demo here, and
Sure.
then we
Yeah.
can switch for the next slide. But I really appreciate when we can switch between the screens and show live demos right away, because a lot of time I have this question of how I can access that admin monitoring tool. So
Yep.
you can actually go. open any of the workloads out of Fabric. Could be Power BI, could be Data Factory, could be any of the workloads out of Fabric. But then when you open the workspace in the left of the screen, you can see that in the top of the workspace, you can check on the admin monitoring. And that's going to be spinning up some of the reports, reading the data of the backend of your tenant. So when you click on the admin monitoring, it's opening that workspace and you can start clicking on the usage. And one of the great things to discuss here is that you can not only have access to the report itself, you can customize your own admin monitoring, because if you check in my screen before, I have access to the semantic model. So that being said, you can access that semantic model and you can create any Power BI report in top of that semantic model. So you can adjust yourself by this administration tool, or you can create your own administration tool. So you can see that in my case, I can have all the capacities and all the active operations to understand who is running what, who is running notebooks, who is running different process in the backend. You can access all the details around the activities, and you can access all the total activities running in your backend. If you want to go to a further analysis, you have all the access to that data, and across all the workspace, you can get the data. As you can see, you can switch for dates, you can check on the activities, you can start visualizing all the data and what is going on in the backend of your tenant. I saw one of the questions in the chat. Is kind of difficult for me to catching up on all the questions, but
Yeah.
can you name all the capacities? Yeah. Anytime you create a new capacity, remember that a capacity is a new service in your Azure portal. So you can create your own capacity. That capacity can go from F2, the smallest one, to F 2048, kind of the higher, really beast level of capacities, but you can name that. It's your service. So you can create multiple capacities, go to your workspace in your Fabric admin, and every single workspace can be backed up by a different capacity. So that is pretty much your needs in terms of compute power.
Yeah, and back to what you said, like developing naming standards at the start are really important because it helps all this make sense later as the usage grows and all that. You don't want to, if you kind of name it, if you name it after like somebody's name, you're going to quickly reach a point where it's, gee, I don't remember what this is for. I don't remember why we have it. So establishing some standards around that, as boring as that meeting can be, is important because part of
Exactly.
our job is
Exactly.
just trying to make sense of all this.
Yeah. Let's switch again to the slides
Yeah.
and let's continue on the scope of the presentation itself. So let's talk about security.
Yeah. Security is kind of an important topic, right? So yes, so this kind of shows kind of what the model is. So you see where it says your data, kind of that center light blue. We've got data security around that, and we've talked a lot about workspaces and artifacts and things like that. You can kind of envision that access control around that, and then network control and security, obviously very important. And another one of those things where we probably need to be friendly with our networking team there, because we're going to be, odds are, working hand in hand with them. And I would say actually in a lot of cases, it's not so much hand in hand. It's they're going to tell you how it's going to be secured, and that's going to be the deal. So yeah, so kind of now that we've kind of worked our way up, let's work our way down. Um, so I do want to highlight kind of some of what we've got here. So when it talks about your data, we do have things. So there, and I always caveat this. So there is high availability and disaster recovery there, like we talked about. This is software as a service, so we're not managing the infrastructure at all. So that kind of stuff is built in. It's probably beyond the scope of this, but there are obviously things you can do in the cloud to make that a little more robust than it is out of the box. But it is there. It, it's encrypted as well. We talked about seeing data lineage and some of those sorts of things as well. Um, Purview is going to be kind of that the space you go to do a lot of that governance and labeling and managing sensitive data and all those sorts of things. And I do want to give, so this link is going to have a lot more information really than we're kind of able to share here. But one question, I don't know about you, I get this from customers a lot, especially ones that are brand new to the cloud. Especially if you're brand new to the cloud in this day and age, usually the reluctance has been, well, the cloud's not secure. Or I remember years ago that there was some sort of breach or whatever. So it's important to, if you're having to have that conversation, it's worthwhile to kind of follow this link and call out a lot of the certifications that these data centers have and a lot of the regulations they have to follow, because odds are they're stronger than anything that a private data center has. Certainly a lot of the ones that I've worked on. So let's talk about a few other things here. And I do find it interesting, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. So we've got HA and DR on the security slide, and we also need to talk about data resiliency a bit as well. Do you find it as interesting as I do that this is on the security slide and not on its own like highly available architecture slide or something like that?
Yeah, I think that there's kind of a always a gray line between what we can call around security, networking, and governance itself. It's a kind of a fine gray line about those topics. And I have multiple clients talking, and kind of the excitement to have more secure options and networking options out of Fabric. And that's why I repeat myself all the time recommending, hey, check the release roadmap, because sometimes you are thinking and wishing for something, and maybe you are doing kind of the right thing to go is to go to ideas.fabric.microsoft.com and put your idea there if you have a need and you have a business case. But sometimes you are putting ideas, and if you check the release roadmap, it's already there. It's already in the plans, and it's
Yeah.
coming, and it's coming soon. So be sure that you check the release roadmap, because you can understand where Microsoft Fabric is going in terms of that concept of one security. That is a really big concept of the platform.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important, I think, with any cloud-based service that you're using to kind of have an idea of what's coming next and try to keep up with that. I, to your point, I think with Fabric, it's even more important because this product is continuously evolving. So the things we're saying here, very well could change. And if you're sitting there saying, well, gee, it doesn't have this now, odds are, like you said, it may have it at some point. So it's good. It's good to kind of watch when those feature waves hit and all that. It's always worth a read to kind of see what's in there. Okay, so let's talk about everybody's favorite topic: managing users and licensing. So you've kind of showed us some of this. You showed us a little bit of kind of what the backend looks like. But licenses, as you might guess, and as we've kind of seen, do control the level of access and the functions that those users can have. And it also goes hand in hand if you've labeled uh, sensitive data or otherwise secured it. This is also part of from our administrative perspective how we manage that. Obviously, these days, whether you're in Europe or even some U.S. states now, data protection laws are a big thing, and so this helps keep us on the right side of those laws, and the right side of the law is usually a pretty good spot to be in. Um, we've talked about this a couple times as well. So while licenses control access and functionality and all that, they also help us control costs a bit because you're making sure, and this is, especially in a larger organization, and I've seen it all the time. It's not uncommon for somebody to say, well, this person needs a license because I gave them a project to do X, or they need to go look at this thing or whatever. That license never gets cleaned back up. And so it's important for those of us kind of inhabiting this Fabric admin role to stay on top of that. And we've seen some of the tools that are there to do that. But it is important, and it doesn't just fall to us. There's also process and procedure that goes around this. Process and procedure are probably not words that anybody sitting out there thinks like, oh, I love that. But it really is important here. We need some sort of a regular, audit is probably maybe too formal a word, maybe not, but some sort of a regular process to make sure using the tools we've talked about, hey, these people are, not only do they have a license, they're out there actually using stuff. And if they're not using stuff, then they probably don't need a license. Um, if license management falls to you, which if you're in this role or looking to be in this role, it probably does, you're going to go to the M365 Admin Center to manage these. And we've got a screenshot there over on the right side of the slide as well. So we've talked about licenses and kind of how to manage those, and you can see it's, again, not terribly exciting, but it is important. And definitely, if you have any questions about this or anything else, keep those coming. We've got a bit of time left, and would certainly love to answer everything before we wrap. So, all right, so we've talked about workspace management, and it should come as no surprise that, like, not only are we administering this and making sure it's secure and all that, it does kind of fall to us to manage what our Fabric users are actually doing. So what are some ways that we can do that? So these workspace roles, we can set a lot of default permissions there, and we should. That's important. Like I said, and I know I keep saying this, but a lot of times in medium to large size clients, um, a lot of times kind of the gates just get thrown open, and it's like, well, we have this service now. Feel free to use it for how you need, because maybe they're not watching costs like a hawk because they are so big. There's so much to worry about that this can kind of fall through the cracks. If we define default permissions there, we can kind of help keep that under control to some extent. And I think that's important. And particularly in Fabric, because we've gone beyond the scope. So if you're sitting out there, it's like a Power BI admin. We had specific things to manage there. Fabric, we've added a lot more stuff. We've got warehouses, we've got pipelines, we've got reports and dashboards, which you're used to, data sets, which you're used to, but we've added a lot more artifacts here. So it's really important to kind of stay on top of these. And I would say a best practice here, and again, this comes back to, it depends, like we talked about earlier. A best practice here in general, I would say, is to grant the least permissive rights that you can. Now, sometimes that's going to get our hand slapped. Sometimes it's going to get us lectured, but that's okay. And kind of the last point I want to make here is we're probably not doing this in a vacuum. We've talked about data governance and things like that. Any of these processes and how we're securing this stuff and all that is generally coming as guidance from wherever the data governance is happening. And maybe that's us too. And in some shops, that's what happens. But generally, this is a collaborative effort with at least other people, if not other teams. All right, data governance, pretty important. It's on, I know a lot, almost every client I go to, this comes up. And there's always, and I get a lot of questions like, well, what's the tool to do it? What's the good tool to do that? Or, what's the right way to do that? That's a whole different session. But let's talk about kind of what Fabric has built in. So Fabric does have the concept, and other tools have this too, but it does have the concept of endorsement, which is basically you as that administrative role, and other folks that may have that role as well. You're endorsing it and saying, this is trusted data, it's approved for your use. So where we talked about earlier, kind of managing things between dev and prod and things like that. Endorsement is one way to say, yes, you can use this. This is ready for prime time now. As admins, we can also make use of the scanner API, which basically scans Fabric items for sensitive data. So even though I just talked about how those processes and procedures are important, and maybe there's a governance team or a governance person or something like that, with Fabric, this doesn't necessarily have to be a manual operation. We can use use that API to help us out and kind of call things out. It says, hey, this looks sensitive. You should probably take some action here. And we can also, and we walked through this earlier, but you can see the data lineage of a lot of these items, and sometimes that can kind of help inform you. Oh, this this artifact kind of downstream that builds on something upstream. Maybe upstream is fairly secured. This artifact downstream isn't, but it should be because it's built on something that has higher security than kind of its endpoint. All right, so we talked about endorsement. This just kind of shows you a little bit about what that looks like. So, what we've got here, you can kind of see on the grid across the bottom. We've obviously got a name. We talked about the importance of good names. We see the type of artifact that it is. We see who owns it. We've got some information about not only when it was refreshed last, but if there's a scheduled one, when that will happen next. And then we've got the things we spent the last couple slides going over. So we've got an endorsement column there where you can show like, yes, this has our seal of approval. I mentioned sensitivity labels a few slides ago, and this is one way to kind of see that too. And so,
if you
yeah,
don't mind, Matt, we can go to my tenant and show a little bit of this one, because
perfect.
actually
Yeah, because this
it's
is a
kind of
bit
a
dry.
exactly what you
Yeah,
can do actually, and this is just to explain a little bit the details. First of all, if you are a Fabric admin, you can go ahead and say, hey, I would love to set the stage, and because I am a Fabric admin, I'm gonna be the one that's gonna be enable, the certification kind of
yep,
process.
yep,
But if you are in a workspace, let's say that you are an admin of the workspace, or if you are a member of the workspace, you are able to do the promotion. So in any of these artifacts, you can go and say, hey, this is the endorsement. Let's say that I'm checking on this account report. So I want to promote this report. So if I am an admin or member of the workspace, I can promote this report. That is kind of the meaningful way is, okay, this report is going to a UAT process. So that
yep,
is why I am promoting that. So that is pretty quick in terms of, going here and say, hey, I want to go to settings, and here you
there you
go.
go.
You have the option to promote or certify. In my case, because I am a Fabric admin, I can certify because I enable that
Right.
option as a Fabric admin. So first of all, I can start doing the promotion and save this one. So I am promoting this one. As you can see, there's a label right now
Yep.
on that report that I am promoting the report.
Well, that's
If I
why it's so
enable, yep,
important
go ahead.
knowing who are in the contributor role, the admin role, things like that, because you're giving them the power to show this as promoted data. If they shouldn't have it, they shouldn't be in that role.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
to go quick on the workspace, you can always manage access to the workspace and say, hey, I would love to define who is an admin, who is, so I can go and check the emails and say, hey, now I can see who has the privilege on that workspace. So you can see who is an admin, who is a member, who is a contributor, who is a viewer on that workspace. And that means that you are allowing them to promote the content out of that workspace. If you're a Fabric admin and you enable the certification process, that means that the member of an admin of that workspace can go here. And that's why I was checking on this option that allow me to certify the report or the semantic model or any of those artifacts. So now I certify, and you can see that is quickly changing from the promotion to certified.
Yeah, and I think an important call out there is, and there was even a link in the description when you did that. There are kind of recommended best practices from Microsoft on what entails a certification. It shouldn't just be I sit down at my desk and say this data is certified. It talks about like a formal review and things like that. So your mileage may vary there, But it's important that at least Microsoft gives us some guidance on what they think should be. So
Exactly.
I know we've
Exactly.
got about 10 minutes left. Let's roll back to the slides because we want to make sure we get everything. I know there are a couple questions. We're going to get to those if we can. So all right. So yeah, we talked about endorsement. Thanks for that demo there. That helps me a lot. I think it's just helpful to see it. There's only so much you can show on a slide. Sometimes it's actually nice to see it go. So we talked about the scanner API. So even though it's called the scanner API, it's actually a set of REST APIs that we can utilize to allow us to scan artifacts in Fabric for sensitive data. So we can scan warehouses, we can scan pipelines, data sets, reports, and dashboards. It can also scan both structured and unstructured data, which I think is pretty interesting as well. It does have to be set up in your org by an admin. So I know this is the admin learn live, but if you're sitting out there and you don't inhabit that role, but you think you should be doing this, you're going to need to go talk to your admin about having this set up for you. And again, that link, that's way more than we could cover in this time, but
Yeah.
that link there will help you kind of go over that. I think this is an important feature because I've talked a lot about like large shops, but even small shops, data can get unwieldy pretty fast. So having automated tools that can help us, yes, we have to write a little bit of code to use them, but having automated tools to help us, I think, is a big win. We've also talked about this a bit, and so I'll kind of go over to this. We saw this earlier, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. But what you've got here is just a view of what the lineage of your data is. So if you're wondering, like, okay, I know this report, where does the data come from? Like, what's its life cycle? How does it get to me? Um, Fabric gives us the ability to do that. And as admins, sometimes we're going to be asked the question, like, where does this come from? Or who made it? Or, why is this here? And so this just kind of helps us answer that again, rather than having to call a meeting and say, well, I think Bob wrote this part and Jane wrote this part. And we get kind of a single pane of glass that's going to show us its whole life. All right. Everybody's favorite topic, licensing. And the caveat here is this. We've talked about capacities a bit, but you'll note in the red kind of Comic Sans-ish font, as of today, this can change. So, and like we've talked about, with anything in the cloud, there's probably an asterisk by it. Fabric, especially, it's evolving constantly. I'm not going to read through all this because, again, it's dry. Licensing always is, right? But just if you're sitting out there saying, well, I want to play with this, my workplace isn't ready for it, we're not going to adopt it, but individually, I want to go mess with this. There's kind of your 3 tiers over there, and you can kind of see what works best for you and what you think you'll need to use. From an infrastructure standpoint, we've already kind of gone over this, and it goes back to why some of those terms are so important. But you see over there kind of what the approximate costs again as of now are. And again, those can change. So even though like cost monitoring is really not an official topic for us here, you should always be doing that with anything you've got in the cloud at all. Keep an eye on it. Those costs can be variable to some extent. And if you're in an administrative role, odds are part of your responsibility is to do exactly that and know all that stuff. Okay, so we've got the knowledge check, but honestly, Gaston, I think we've done such an awesome job and we only have 7 minutes left. Like everybody knows everything, right? We can just skip this. So
Uh,
we'll go over the questions briefly, but given the time, we're not, so we're going to cheat and we're going to skip ahead. We'll just assume you guys know all this stuff. So again, we talked about understanding that what all those terms are is important, which makes sense because question 1 of the knowledge check asks us what one of those were. Question 2, again, I almost feel like I'm doing something wrong because I'm skipping ahead to the answers, but that's okay. So we just went over this stuff, so hopefully this is fresh in your mind. What we talked about were certifications, kind of that highest level, and so obviously that's at a tenant level, a little higher security required to do that. Promotions a little more open. Um, but that's why it's important. Like we want to know, we want to understand who all is a member of that workspace and why, because we're giving them the ability to do this. So if they shouldn't do this, that's no good. Okay. All right. So why don't we sum things up? So what do we teach these folks?
We've been kind of talking about all around Fabric admin task. We've been navigating all around the admin center. It's really important for anyone coming to the Fabric admin role, even if you are doing this for the first time. Check it out, all the options in the Fabric admin portal, because there's so many options. You have now a search option back there to go directly to what you really need in that scope of what you are trying to enable for your tenant. And we discuss a bunch of things around the manage for user access. We start the process of a high level at the tenant level, then going to the capacity level, the workspace level, until the item level. So remember that all the granular levels that you have in Fabric allow you to start checking on who is accessing which kind of artifacts or data. And based on your needs, you can define where to go to define that kind of granular level of access. Couple of things that I would love to recall, Matt, here is, we have a couple of questions from the audience
We
that I
do.
just kind of skip a bunch of them. But one of the great question was, how do you endorse when you are using CI/CD? How
Yes.
you can endorse or promote or certify? I need to check that out, but I am guessing that in the CI/CD framework, you can access the REST API of the backend of any artifact across your tenant, and you can move them to a promote state or a certified state based on your needs. So you can automate that process as part of your CI/CD framework.
Right. Yeah. And even though a lot of what we've shown here was through the GUI, which makes sense because we're demoing for an audience and reading code is not super exciting. It's important to note that a lot of this stuff, like we've talked about, it can be automated on the back end.
Exactly. I heard another topic, and this is kind of a really common question: is can I use my personal email account to spin up a new Microsoft 365 developer program sandbox?
Yeah.
My advice is don't do that. Don't use your Hotmail, your Gmail. Go there. It's totally free. Go and open an own Microsoft.com account first, and then go up to
It's
and
easier.
link that account
Yeah.
to your Microsoft 365 developer program, so you can start from scratch. Getting your sandbox on that one, and then you can go further on the line to start your enable your Fabric trial for that one.
For sure. Okay. All right. So we definitely want to hit this. This is the learning path that we kind of went over. Well worth your time. It says there about 30 minutes. I found that to be pretty accurate. It's not too bad. And it's going to give you kind of an interactive ability. Some of the demos and things we showed, you're going to see, you're going to be able to be hands-on with that. Pretty cool. We'll go ahead and put this schedule up again. Like we said, they saved the best for last. So we're wrapping up wave one. Definitely go back and rewatch all these. They've done a really good job, I think, putting together these 9 sessions. Like this is going to get you a really good foundation of knowledge on a lot of the things you can do in Fabric. And again, if you want to preview it, this is how you do it, aka.ms/upgrade-2-fabric. And that is all the slides I have. Is there anything else we want to tell the folks before we wrap this up?
Really glad to be here with you, Matt. This was a
It was
really
fun.
great experience on my end, and really happy to be part of the Microsoft Learn Live. So keep coming, keep going in terms of be hands-on on Microsoft Fabric, and keep learning and engage with
Absolutely.
your community.
Absolutely. Great advice. Thank you so much.